Hi there, this is Dr. Dell. What I want to talk to you about in this video is using the calculator that we use in our training, because as you know from everything that I've been telling you on all the different training videos, this calculator is designed to save you a tremendous amount of time. Now, a calculator is a wonderful tool, but it can be intimidating if you've never used one very much and if you're not familiar with it. It's really like a combination of power tools. There's a whole lot of things you can do with this calculator if you know how to do it. And so what I want to do in this video is just play with the calculator and just show you a lot of things. You won't even necessarily understand the meaning of some of these things, but it'll just give you an idea of how you can play with it and how you can learn with it and have some fun with it. Now, I recommend that you actually study the 3 videos that we've already have on the CD for you on numbers. There's one on real numbers, one on using a calculator. In fact, there's 3 altogether. And then after you've done that, you can play with this. Now, if you're already familiar with those kind of topics, then you can go to it right away. As you know, we use this Texas Instrument 30XA throughout the training, and I use it because it's a very useful, very effective calculator, and it's not very expensive, and it's my favorite calculator for this type of thing. Now, the first thing you always do is turn it on, of course, and you know from what you've already learned that you have the various keys that you can use, and I just want to play with it and get you to playing with it. Now, the way I would suggest that you actually probably do this is I'll tell you things I'm doing, and then you pause the video and do it yourself. And if you have to, move back a little bit in it and re-watch something. And really the point is for you to play with your calculator. You should have one just like this to really get much out of it, and you should be playing with it. The basic keys that we use, and we'll start with the simplest key, is the plus key. And as you know how that works, when you turn on your calculator, you just enter a number, like 45 for example, and add to it another number, let's say 23, and you get the sum number. Now, one of the interesting things about a calculator, about the plus key, is that it has an inverse key, meaning something you can do to undo what you just did. So, for example, if you take 14 and add it to, say, 19, you get 33. Now, if you subtract 19, what you just added, you get back to where you started, 14. So the minus key undoes the plus key, and vice versa. If you take 98 and subtract, say, 45, you get 53. Now, if you add 45, then you get back to 98. So the plus and the minus key sort of undo each other, and those are called inverses. As it turns out, virtually every operation that you can do with this calculator has an inverse operation that will undo it. So that's kind of one way you can check to see if you did something right or if you might have entered the wrong number. For example, let's take multiplication. 5 times 8 equals 40. Now, divide is the inverse. So if we divide by 8, we should get back to 5. And I invite you to play with numbers like this. Take 12.5, multiply times 78, and you get a number, 975. Divide by 78, and you're back to 12.5. Now, if I'm going a little fast, you go just play with numbers on your own and do this and see how these two undo each other. For example, you could take 95 divided by 125, and you get 0.76. Then if you multiply with 125, bingo, you get back your 95. So these two operations undo each other. And that's a really handy thing to know and to have, and it's just something to play with. Now I want to play with some of the other keys that we have here. A key that we often use is the square root key, and its inverse key is the x squared key. And of course they're inverses of each other. So for example, if you would take 98 and take the square root, you get a number. Now you notice that I've got it fixed at a lot of decimal places. Just to make it a little easier to look at, I'm going to fix this at 2 decimal places, which we've taught you to do other places, and that's 9.9. How did I get that? Well, I took the square root of 98. So let's square it, hit the x squared key, and bingo, now we've got 98 back again. So the square root key and the x squared undo each other. Another example, take 13.6 and square it, and you get a number, 184.96. Now, take the square root, you're back to 13.6. This is nothing, not a big deal. It's just something to play around with. And I do want to point out to you, as I have in other videos, that you can make a mistake with the calculator, but the good news about this little power tool is it never blows up. I've never seen smoke come out of it. All that happens is if you make a mistake is that you get an error message. So let's make a mistake. Let's take 1 and divide it by 0, which is a no-no, and when we hit equal, we get the error message. That just tells us we did something that is an unallowable operation. So you hit the clear button and just continue on. Another way you could get an error message is to take a number and take its negative. I've got minus 12 now. And now you take the square root and you get an error message because this calculator does not deal with what are called complex or imaginary numbers. It only deals with real numbers. So we'll clear it. And now let's take a number, say 125, and let's square it. We get a bigger number. Then if we take the square root, we're back to 125. So they undo each other. Now let me show you something that's kind of interesting. Let's take, let's say 7, and let's take the square root once. We get 2.65. Let's take the square root of that. 1.63. Let's take the square root of that. 1.28. Let's take the square root of that. 1.13. Now the x squared key will undo all that. Do it once, you get 1.28, then you get 1.63, 2.65, and you're back to 7. So you can put in any number. Take the square root 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Then take the square key 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and you're back to where you started. So these numbers are inverses, and you can chain them together. So that's those two keys. Now let's take the 1 over x key, the reciprocity key. Let's take 12, for example, and let's hit the 1 over x, and we get 0.08. Now 1 over x is its own inverse. Hit it again, and you get 12 back. In this case, no matter what number you enter, if you hit 1 over x, you get a number. Now that looks like that's 0, but it's really not. If you hit 1 over x, you get 245 back. I ask you, why wasn't that 0? Well, watch this. Hit 1 over x, and now let's fix this at many decimal places. And the answer really is 0.00408163, and the calculator knew that. That was internal in its registers. And so then when you hit 1 over x, you're back to 245. But by fixing the decimal point at only 2 places, it looked like it was 0.00. But the calculator knew what it really was, and it had it stored inside. And that's one of the interesting things about this calculator is it doesn't matter how many decimal places you're showing with the fix command, it stores all of them internally.